Most men my age keep a phone by the bed out of habit. A wrong number, a robocall, a friend who forgot the hour. I kept mine by the bed for 31 years because of the job. And even 3 years retired. Even with my wife gone and the house quiet as a held breath, some old part of me still slept with one ear open, waiting for the ring that means somebody's worst night is happening right now. It came at 11:38 on a Tuesday. It was my daughter, and she was whispering. My name is Frank Kowalski. I'm 69 years old. I spent 31 years as a police officer in Pittsburgh. Patrol at first, like everybody. But I spent the last 12 years of my career in a unit most people don't like to think about. Domestic violence. I was the man who walked into the houses after the neighbors called. The one who sat at 100 kitchen tables while a woman held a bag of frozen peas to her face and told me it was fine. It was nothing. He didn't mean it. Please don't make it worse. I learned the shape of that particular evil better than I ever wanted to. I learned how it talks, how it charms, how it isolates a person one friend at a time until there's nobody left to call. I retired 6 years ago. My wife, Ellie, passed 3 years back. Since then, I've lived quiet. I bake bread now, if you can believe it. Sourdough. I've got a starter older than my granddaughter. Ellie's actually. She kept it alive on our kitchen counter for 30 years, and when she passed, I couldn't bring myself to let it die too. So now I feed it a little flour every morning like it's some small stubborn pet. And most mornings, that's the longest conversation I have. I go to the 9 o'clock mass. I coach nobody, and I bother nobody. And to look at me shuffling out to get the paper in my robe, you would see exactly what my son-in-law always saw. A harmless old man. That was the mistake he made. 6 years, he made it. He looked at the quiet, gray-haired fellow who brought bread to Sunday dinner, and he decided he had my whole measure. He never once asked me what I did for a living. Not once in 6 years. Men like him don't ask. They assume. They assume the whole world is either a threat worth watching or furniture worth ignoring, and he'd file me a long time ago under furniture. On a Tuesday night last spring, at 11:38, my son-in-law found out he'd filed me wrong. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because to understand that night, you have to understand the 2 years I spent being lied to by everyone I loved for the kindest of reasons right under my 31 years trained nose. Before I take you into it, do an old man one small kindness. If you've ever loved somebody who was being hurt in a house you couldn't see into, tap subscribe. It costs nothing, and it tells me you know why this story matters. Give a like as well. And at the end, I'm going to ask you something I still don't have a clean answer to myself, so hold your thoughts for the comments. Let me tell you about my daughter. Her name is Maggie. She's 34. She's the best thing Ellie and I ever did, and I don't say that lightly. Growing up, she was fearless, climbed every tree, questioned every rule, argued me to a standstill at the dinner table more nights than I'll admit. She had a spine on her like a steel beam. That's the part that took me longest to understand, later. How a man breaks a spine like that. It isn't all at once. It's the opposite of all at once. It's so slow, she doesn't even feel it bending. She married Brett 6 years ago. Brett Vance. I'll be honest with you about Brett, because the honesty matters. In a room full of people, Brett was the best guy there. Firm handshake, remembered your name, remembered your kids' names, bought the first round, told a funny story. Everybody loved Brett. Ellie loved Brett. At the wedding, I stood up and toasted him and meant every word. I remember one 4th of July, maybe 3 years in, Brett ran the whole cookout, flipped every burger, refilled every glass, had my wife's church friends eating out his hand, told a story about Maggie that put the whole yard on the floor laughing. And I stood by the cooler feeling grateful, feeling lucky, that my girl had married a man who lit up a room like that. What I didn't see, what I've since made myself go back and see, was Maggie in the corner of that same yard, laughing a half beat behind everyone else, her eyes go to Brett's face first to know when it was safe to laugh. The performance wasn't for the guests. It never is. A man that beloved in public buys himself a mountain of disbelief for whatever he does in private. That isn't a side effect of the charm. That's the whole job of it. The thing about the good ones, and by good I mean good at it, is that the charm isn't a mask they take off. It's a tool they use in public and put down at home. And you never see them put it down because when they put it down, the doors are closed. My granddaughter came 2 years into the marriage. Lily, she's 6 now. She has Ellie's laugh, which nearly puts me on the floor every time I hear it. And it was right around when Lily was born that the small things started. The things I should have read like a book and didn't because you don't want to read that book about your own child. Maggie started canceling. Sunday dinners, my birthday, the little visits. Always a reason. Brett had plans, Lily was fussy, work was crazy. When I did see her, Brett answered her phone. I called Maggie and Brett would pick up, cheerful. Hey Frank, she's just putting Lily down, everything good? I thought it was sweet. A husband handling the phone so his wife could rest. I know now it wasn't sweet. It was a checkpoint. She got quieter. My steel beam girl, who'd argued me to a standstill, went quiet at dinner and looked at Brett before she answered questions. She wore long sleeves in July. She flinched once when I set a pan down too hard. A quick flinch, gone in a blink, and she laughed it off, and I let her because the alternative was a thing I could not let myself see. There was more, and I saw all of it, and I explained all of it away. She quit the job she loved. She'd been a physical therapist, good at it, proud of it. And when I asked why, Brett answered for her, said they decided it made more sense for her to be home with Lily, and Maggie nodded along a half second too late. Her own bank account disappeared into a joint one Brett controlled. I only know that now. She stopped posting pictures, stopped seeing her college friends, stopped being anywhere Brett wasn't. One Sunday, she came to dinner without him, a rare thing. And for about an hour, she was my Maggie again, loud and funny. And then her phone buzzed and she read the text and something closed over her face like a garage door coming down. And she said she had to go and she was gone inside of 5 minutes. I stood in my driveway and watched her taillights, and I felt, way down in the train part of me, an alarm I'd spent 2 years muffling with a pillow. I went back inside and I did the dishes and I told myself my girl was just busy, just tired, just growing up in a way, the way they do. That's the machine he'd built. Cut off the money, cut off the work, cut off the friends, cut off the father gently, so gently, one canceled Sunday at a time, until the only person left in her whole world was the one hurting her. I had watched that exact machine get built in 100 other houses. I could have drawn you the blueprints. And I sat in my own kitchen and called it growing up. Here's the shameful part, friend. The part I've had to make my peace with. I spent 12 years of my life being the one person trained to see exactly this. I sat at 100 kitchen tables and read these exact signs off of strangers in under 5 minutes. And when it showed up on my own daughter, one at a time, over 2 years, I looked straight at them and I told myself a softer story every single time. Because the trained cop and the frightened father were the same man, and the father won every argument. That's the cruelest trick of it. It hides best from the people who love the victim most. Love makes you generous with the excuses. And a man like Brett knows that. He counts on it. The last normal conversation I had with my daughter before that Tuesday, she called me. A rare thing, her calling me. And she said, "Dad, do you still have your old service weapon locked up? Is it locked up safe with Lily coming over sometimes?" And I said, of course it was, always had been. And she said, "Good, that's good." And there was something in her voice I chose to hear as tiredness. I've gone back to that phone call 1,000 times. She wasn't asking about Lily. She was asking me something else, in the only language she had left that Brett wouldn't flag. And I missed it. God help me, I missed it. 9 days later, My phone rang at 11:38. If you're still with me, and I know this one is hard to sit with, do an old man the kindness of tapping subscribe before I take you into that night. It's free, and it tells me a story like this found the people it was meant to find. Now let me tell you about the 11 minutes that changed everything. I want to take you into that night now, minute by minute, because it's the reason you're here, and because I've never told it whole. I came up out of sleep the way old cops do. All at once, no grogginess, the phone already in my hand. The screen said Maggie. My stomach dropped before I even answered, because Maggie did not call at 11:38 at night. Maggie barely called at noon anymore. "Mags," I said, and there was a whisper, barely a breath. "Dad." Then quieter still, "Dad, I need help. Please. I'm sorry, I didn't know who else. Please just come. Don't call the police. Please, Dad, don't call anyone. It makes it worse. Last time it made it so much worse. Just you. Please come." I've replayed those 7 seconds more than any other 7 seconds of my life. Now here's where 31 years does something to a man that never washes out. Because the father in me wanted to scream, wanted to fall apart, wanted to ask 100 questions. And the cop in me stepped in front of the father, calm as still water, and took the wheel the way it had 10,000 times before, and it started counting. "Where are you right now, sweetheart?" I said, low and even. "Exact. Bathroom. Upstairs. I locked it. He's downstairs. He's been drinking. He's dead. He's really bad tonight. Worse than..." Her voice cracked and dropped. "Lily's asleep in her room. I don't want to leave without her. I can't leave her here with him." "You're not going to. Listen to me. Is the bathroom door solid or hollow? The lock, is it a button or a key?" A tiny pause. She'd forgotten, for 1 second, to be terrified because I'd given her a small concrete thing to do instead. That's the first thing you do. You give the drowning person one solid thing to hold. It's button. It's just a button lock. Then you push her back against the door, and you keep your feet flat on the floor, and you do not open it for anyone but me. "I'm coming. I'm 11 minutes out. Stay on the line if you can. If you can't, you drop the phone in your pocket, and you leave the call running, and you don't hang up. You understand me, Maggie?" "Okay," she breathed. "Okay, Daddy." She hadn't called me Daddy since she was 9 years old. I was already dressed. I'd been dressed and moving since the word help, pulling on the pants I'd left on the chair, stepping into shoes because the body remembers even when the mind is screaming. And as I went down my own stairs 2 at a time at 69 years old, I made a decision I need you to understand. My daughter had just begged me 3 times not to call the police, and I was about to call them anyway. I want to be honest about how hard that was, because there's nothing a father wants more in that moment than to do the one thing his terrified child is asking him to do. She was drowning, and she'd told me which way to reach for her, and every soft cell in my body wanted to obey. But 31 years had taught me something her fear couldn't see from inside that locked bathroom. And so I overrode my own daughter at the worst moment of her life, and I've had to live with that choice ever since. She said don't call, and she had her reasons, and they were good ones. The last time someone called 911 to that house, 2 officers rolled up who didn't know the family. Brett met them at the door. Handshake. Smile. That reasonable, lowered voice. And he turned the whole thing around inside of 10 minutes. "She's been drinking, officers. She gets like this. Look how upset she is. I'm the one who called you, really." They looked at a calm, friendly man and a shaking, crying woman, and they did what people do. They believed the calm one. They left. The door closed. And Maggie paid for that phone call for a week. That is not a knock on those 2 officers. It's how the trick works. It's engineered down to the millimeter to make the victim look like the problem and the predator look like the guy who called for help. I had watched 100 Bretts run that exact play across 12 years, and I knew it cold, and I knew the only thing that beats it. You don't send strangers. You send people who already know the play before they walk in the door. So I didn't call 911 and get two strangers. I called Gus. Gus Petrakis was my partner for 9 years on the DV unit. He's a sergeant now, still on the job, works nights. I called Gus from my driveway with the engine already turning over, and in 15 seconds, because Gus and I speak a language you only learn from 1,000 bad doors together, I told him what I had. A barricaded victim, a child in the home, an intoxicated aggressor with a history, and a daughter who was mine. And I told him the one thing that changes everything, the thing the responding units needed to know before they knocked, that the charming man who'd meet them at the door was the danger, not the frightened woman upstairs. That they were not to take the door greeter's word for one single syllable. Gus said, "Frank, do not go in there before we're on scene." And I said, "Gus, it's Maggie." And Gus, who has known my daughter since she was in pigtails, was quiet for exactly 1 second. And then he said, "Units are rolling. I'm rolling. Drive safe, brother. We're right behind you. 11 minutes. I'll tell you what a man thinks about in 11 minutes when it's his own daughter on the other end of the drive. He thinks about every dinner he let her cancel. Every long sleeve in July he pretended not to see. Every time that man answered her phone and he called it sweet. 12 years reading these signs off of strangers, and he'd gone blind, willfully, beautifully, catastrophically blind, in the one house where it counted most. I drove through the dark, and I let myself feel all of it, all at once, and then, because the job teaches you this too, I set it down. You cannot carry guilt and do the work at the same time. The guilt is for after. The next 11 minutes were for Maggie. Somewhere on Route 8, I talked to Ellie. I do that still when it's bad. I said, "Ellie, I've got her, I'm going to get her, girl." And I swear to you the road felt a little straighter after. Ellie always could steady my hands. And under the grief, cold and automatic, the old training was already laying it out like a checklist on a clipboard. Layout of the house. I knew it. I'd assembled Lily's crib in that upstairs hall, where the exits were, where Lily's room sat relative to the bathroom. What Brett would do when a bad showed up, which was smile. What he'd do when the smile failed, which was the thing I was racing to get between. I ran it all the way a man runs a route he's driven 10,000 times, and it kept the father from screaming, and it kept the wheels on the road, and it got me there. I kept her on the line. 7 of those minutes I could hear her breathing, fast and shallow, and every so often my own voice, steady, telling her I was on Route 8 now. I was passing the sheets. I was 6 minutes out. 5, hold on, baby. Keep your feet flat on that floor. Then at about minute 8, I heard him. Not words at first. Just the sound of a man's voice coming up through a house. That low register that isn't loud yet, but is promising to be. Then closer. Then the stairs. Then his voice on the other side of that bathroom door. And I want to tell you, friend, hearing the man who is hurting your child through a phone while you are still 4 minutes away is a particular corner of hell I did not know existed. Open the door, Mag. Reasonable. Almost gentle. That was the worst part, the gentleness. Come on. This is stupid. Open the door and let's talk like adults. You're scaring Lily. A pause. A softer, uglier tone. You really want the neighbors to see this? You really want to do this again? I heard my daughter whisper, so quiet, not to him, to me, into the phone in her pocket. "Dad, he's here. He's at the door." And I said the only thing there was to say. 3 minutes, Maggie. I am 3 minutes away. Do not open that door. I am coming. I made that drive in a time I will not admit to on the internet. Now, here's where my son-in-law learned who I really was. I came up the front walk, and I did not run, and I did not shout, because 31 years teaches you that the man who arrives shouting has already given away every advantage he has. I came up quiet and fast, and I tried the front door, and Brett, in his rage, in his certainty that no one was coming, had left it unlocked. Of course he had. Who was coming? Just the harmless old man, hours away, asleep in his robe. I stepped into my daughter's house, and I heard him upstairs, still working on that door, his voice climbing now, and I went up those stairs with a calm coming over me that I hadn't felt in 6 years. An old, familiar, cold and total calm. The one that used to come down over me the second I crossed a bad threshold. The one Ellie used to call my work face. Brett had his shoulder against the bathroom door. He was telling my daughter what he was going to do when she opened it. I said his name. Once. Not loud. Brett. He spun around, and I watched it happen on his face in real time. The thing I've been waiting 6 years to watch. The confusion first. What is the old man doing here? Then the reflex, the automatic reach for the tool, the charm, the smile, snapping onto his face like it always did. Frank, hey. Okay. This is a misunderstanding. Okay. Maggie's had a rough night. She gets. Step away from the door. Something in how I said it stopped the smile halfway. He'd never heard that voice out of me. Nobody in my family had, because I'd left that voice at the precinct when I retired. It's the voice you use exactly once, and it means the time for the other voices is over. He tried anyway. They always try anyway. He took a step toward me, big man, 30 years younger, and he said the thing men like him always say to men like me, the exact words I'd heard in a dozen doorways over 12 years, the words he'd been carrying around about me for 6 years without ever saying out loud. What are you going to do about it, old man? There it was. 6 years of contempt, finally out loud. And friend, some cold, tired part of me had been waiting for that exact sentence since the day he married my daughter. Because a man only says that to someone he has completely misjudged. He said it the way you'd say it to a piece of furniture that startled you by speaking. He had no idea it was the last free sentence he'd get that night. And I told him, I'm going to tell you what I did for 31 years, I said, and I kept walking toward him, slow, steady, closing the distance. And I'm going to tell you the 2 officers pulling up outside right now are men I know by name. And I'm going to tell you that I spent 12 years putting men exactly like you in cars. And I know every single thing you're about to try, because I've watched 100 of you try it. The smile doesn't work on me, Brett. The she's crazy officer doesn't work on me. The tears won't work either, and I know you've got those too. I wrote the report on every one of those tricks 1,000 times, and I taught the young cops how to see through them. So here's the only choice you've got left tonight. You can sit down on that floor with your hands where I can see them, where you can find out that 31 years on the job doesn't leave a man's hands just because his hair went gray. He came at me. I like to tell you it was some big Hollywood thing. It wasn't. It was over in about 4 seconds, and it was the least dramatic thing in the world, because 31 years is 31 years, and a raging drunk telegraphs everything, and I did not hurt him more than I had to. I turned his own momentum. I took him down to the hallway floor the way I'd done more times than I can count, and I put my knee where it goes and his wrist where it goes, and I held him there, a strong young man, held on the floor of the house he'd terrorized by the old man he'd never once thought to ask about. And I did not squeeze 1 ounce harder than I needed to, because that too is the job, and I was still, even then, on the job. And I leaned down close, and while he swore and thrashed, I said the quietest thing I said all night. Her name is Maggie. She is my daughter, and you were never, not for 1 second, the most dangerous man in this house. I heard the bathroom door unlock behind me. Maggie came out, and she saw me on the floor holding her husband, and she made a sound I will hear until I die. Relief and grief and 6 years of held breath all coming out at once. And then a little voice from down the hall said, "Grandpa," and there was Lily in her pajamas, woken by the noise, standing in her doorway, rubbing her eyes. And I did the hardest small thing of the whole night. I made my work face go away. I looked at my granddaughter with Ellie's laugh, and I made my voice in the voice I used for her, the bread and Sunday dinner voice, and I said, "Hey there, Lily Bug. Everything's okay. Grandpa's here." Daddy's just having a hard time, and some nice police officers are going to come help him. Can you go hold your mama's hand for me? The porch lights lit up blue and red. Gus's units. Right behind me, exactly like he said. Gus came through that door first, gray and solid and 20 years my junior. And he took in a whole scene in one sweep the way we were both trained to. Me on the floor, Maggie and Lily against the wall, Brett spitting threats into the carpet. He didn't ask me a single question. He just put his hand on my shoulder for 1 second, the way partners do, and said, "We've got him, Frank. Go be your dad." So I let go of Brett. I stood up, 69 years old, and every joint announcing it. And I walked past the man on the floor like he was already the past tense he'd become. And I knelt down in that hallway and gathered my daughter and my granddaughter into my arms. I held on. And for the first time in 11 minutes, for the first time in 2 years, if I'm honest, I set the work face down and let the Father have the will back. Let me tell you how it went after, because this is the part where knowing who I really was actually mattered. Not the 4 seconds in the hallway, but everything that came after them. Because here's the terrible truth about men like Brett. Most of the time they walk. The charm works on the system too. The reports come out vague. The victim recants out of fear by morning. The DA can't make it stick, and 90 days later he's back in the house and angrier. I had watched it happen 100 heartbreaking times. It is the thing that made me retire, if I'm honest. The exhaustion of watching the door revolve. So I made sure this one didn't revolve. There was something else too. Something Gus turned up in the days after that turned my stomach and hardened my spine in equal measure. Brett had done this before. Before Maggie, there'd been another woman, a fiancée, 2 towns over, a case that got opened and then quietly closed when she stopped cooperating and moved away and disappeared from her own life. It never came up when Maggie met him, because a drop case leaves barely a shadow, and men like Brett count on that too, on the way the system forgets, on the fresh start every new town hands them. He hadn't changed a thing between her and my daughter. He just found someone new whose father hadn't spent 31 years learning the pattern. This time the pattern met somebody who'd memorized it. And I made sure the people who needed to know about that earlier woman knew, because a man's history is the truest thing a courtroom can hear about him, and Brett's history was finally, for once, going to be allowed to speak. The officers who came through that door were, like I promised Brett, men who knew me. And when old Frank Kowalski from the DV unit is standing in the house telling you calmly and precisely what he witnessed, with dates and a history and a barricaded victim and a child, you get a very different kind of report than 2 strangers write. I knew exactly what the statement needed to say and exactly what it needed to avoid. I knew to photograph what needed photographing. I knew, because I taught it, that the most important hours in a domestic case are the first 3, before the fear creeps back in and starts erasing things. And I knew the one thing that saves a woman like my daughter more than any arrest. I knew the advocates. I got Maggie connected that same night, before sunrise, to a domestic violence advocate named Rosa, who I'd worked beside for years, a woman who could walk Maggie through the protective order, the safety plan, the whole terrifying maze so that my daughter never once had to stand it alone. Because an arrest is a night. Getting free is a year, and it's the year that breaks most people, and nobody should walk it by themselves. Brett was arrested that night. Because of the child in the home, because of the history we could now document, because of the earlier woman 2 towns over, because of a barricaded victim and an old cop who witnessed the assault firsthand and knew exactly how to preserve every piece of it. The charges had teeth this time. It did not revolve back through that door in 90 days. There's a protective order now with real weight behind it, and a custody arrangement built by people who understood exactly what he was, and a divorce moving through the courts, and my daughter and my granddaughter are living for now in my quiet house that smells like sourdough, with a phone by the bed rings only for robocalls again. Maggie's spine is coming back. It's slow, the opposite of all at once, same as it went. She sees a counselor Rosa found her twice a week. Some days are bad. She'll go quiet at the table for no reason I can see, and I've learned not to set a pan down hard. But the other week, she argued me to a standstill about something that didn't matter at all, and I had to go stand in the kitchen for a minute so she wouldn't see her old man cry over a disagreement about whether the Steelers have a defense. I still bake bread. Lily helps now. She's terrible at it. Gets more flour on the ceiling than in the bowl. It's the best part of my week. The other night, the three of us were in the kitchen. Lily up on her stool with flour in her hair, Maggie laughing at something on the radio, the whole warm, ordinary racket of a house with life back in it. Maggie caught me watching them, and she came over and put her head on my shoulder the way she used to when she was small, and she said, "Thank you for not honoring what I asked, Dad." Just that. I couldn't answer. I didn't trust my voice. So I held on to my girl in that flour-dusted kitchen, and I thank God and Ellie and 31 years of a job I thought I'd left behind. I go back and forth, some nights about the 2 years I didn't see it. A trained man, blind in his own family's house. I've talked to Gus about it, and to Rosa, and Rosa said the thing that lets me sleep. She said, "Frank, it hides best from the ones who love her most." That's not your failure. That's the design. You didn't miss it because you're a bad cop. You missed it because you're her dad. Most nights, that's enough. For 31 years, I was the stranger who showed up at the worst moment of other families' lives. I never once imagined I'd be that stranger for my own. But when the call finally came, I want you to know every one of those 31 years came with me up those stairs. My badge has sat in a sock drawer for 6 years. I hadn't taken it out since the day I turned in its twin. But I've come to believe a man doesn't really retire from what he is, only from where he does it. You spend 3 decades standing between people and the worst night of their lives, and it does not leave you when you clean out your locker. It just goes quiet. It waits. It sleeps by the bed with one ear open, for years if it has to, until the night somebody you love needs you to wake all the way up. My son-in-law spent 6 years certain he was the most dangerous man in every room he walked into. He looked at the quiet old man bringing bread to Sunday dinner, and he saw something soft, something finished, something safe to sneer at. He never asked what I did for a living. If he had, he might have learned the one thing I know better than any other thing in this world. The quiet ones aren't quiet because they've got nothing in them. Sometimes they're quiet because they've already seen the worst the world can do, and they're just waiting, patient as an old dog by a door for the day someone they love needs them to remember how to open it. Now here's my question, and I mean it because I truly go back and forth. My daughter begged me not to call the police that night. I called them anyway. The right ones, the ones I trusted, but I still went against her frightened wishes to do it. Was I right to override her in that moment? Or should a man honor what a terrified person asks, even when every instinct he's got is screaming the other way? Tell me down in the comments. I've got 31 years of opinions, and I'm still not sure. If this story meant something to you, do an old man that kindness, subscribe, hit like, and go check on the quiet one in your family who stopped calling. Somebody in your life might be pushing their back against the door right now, waiting to remember they've got someone to call. I'll see you next time.